Hello folks, this is Rodrigo Werle. I'm the new Extension Cropping Systems weed scientist with UW-Madison and UW Extension. Today I'm here to provide you with some tips for water hemp management in soybeans for the 2018 growing season. Earlier this year in January, during the agronomy update meetings, I conducted a survey and I asked farmers, agronomists, and industry reps what were the most concerning weeds in the state of Wisconsin. And water hemp was the #1 concerning species there, followed by giant ragweed. And this is why today I want to focus a little bit on water hemp management here. Before we talk about water hemp management, I just want to share this with you this map. In red here you have the counties where glyphosate resistant water hemp populations have been confirmed in the state of Wisconsin, and as you can see here we have 25 counties with glyphosate resistant water hemp populations. We also have 4 counties with confirmed PPO resistant populations, and those counties are Iowa, Monroe, Pierce, and St. Croix County. So glyphosate resistance and also some instances of PPO resistance confirmed in the state, and that makes control of the species more challenging. Before we start talking about management of water hemp per se, I just want to talk a little bit about the biology. If you're not familiar with the water hemp plant, this is what a water hemp young plant looks like. You have this long, narrow leaves in there. They tend to be waxy and this light green coloration. In order to differentiate water hemp from some of the other pigweed species, you want to look at that stem there. Water hemp stems won't have those white short hairs that you see in red root pigweed. And the patio here, which is the structure that connects the leaf blade to the stem, is short there. Okay, so no hairs and short patio. Long and narrow leaves, those are key identifying characteristics for water hemp. In order to manage a weed species, it's important to understand its biology, and I classify water hemp as this ideal weed for cropping systems. The reason being is because it's a genetically diverse species. It has male and female plants. Okay, the female plants are very prolific seed producers, and the male plants are very prolific pollen producers. Okay, and this species, this male and female plants, they outcross, and there's a lot of opportunities there for genetic diversity for this outcrossing species. And when you have genetic diverse weed population out there, you're more likely to select for resistant biotypes if you're using the same management strategy over and over. Water hemp is a little different from some of the other weed species we deal with. And the reason being is that because it has a wide emergence window. So water hemp starts emerging a little later in the season, so it'll start emerging in May, and will continue to emerge all the way through July or even August sometimes. And that's why trying to take a one-pass approach for control of water hemp may not provide adequate level of weed control there. It has vigorous growth, so once conditions are ideal, if you have warm weather and enough soil moisture, this plant can put more than an inch a day. And the reason why that becomes important is that if you have glyphosate resistant water hemp and you're trying to control this weed with a post-emergence application of a contact product such as your PPOs or even glufosinate and Liberty Link soybeans, you got to be there early. Because if you miss that ideal window, that weed is going to get too big and you're not likely to get good levels of weed control. This weed species is very well adapted to minimum and no tillage. It produces very small seeds, and when you have minimum or no tillage out there, you provide this weed the ideal condition or environment, if you would, to get established. So all combined, all these factors combined, they make water hemp this what I call ideal weed for current systems there. So what about management? First of all, I want to share some of this data here from USDA National Ag Statistics Service. This figure here on the left, I it's the herbicide use pattern in soybeans for the 2015 year, and as you can see here, the primary the herbicides that we're using the most are glyphosate and imazethapyr. Okay, and on the right side of the screen here, I have the results of my survey again, where I asked the various groups of ag professionals out there, what is the standard herbicide program for weed control in soybeans, whether it's a one-pass program or whether it's a two-pass program in season. And as you can see here, roughly 45% of our farmers and agronomists are still adopting a one-pass program in soybeans. They're combining with this USDA data here. You can see that herbicide is mainly going to be glyphosate with or without imazethapyr. Okay, so if you have a weed that emerges year-round and has evolved resistance to glyphosate, using glyphosate alone or using the one pass with glyphosate plus imazethapyr will probably not help you achieve the level of weed control you want to achieve with it. The one thing I want to stress out, if you look at this figure here, we're not taking advantage, or we're not incorporating pre-emergent herbicides in our herbicide programs in soybean as often as we could, and that's something we should be looking into as we go into the 2018 growing season, particularly if you're struggling with some of this troublesome weeds that I'm talking about. So these are some pictures that I obtained from my colleague down in Nebraska, Dr. Amit Jala. It's some studies that we ran a couple years ago looking at different herbicide programs and the control of glyphosate-resistant water hemp in a Liberty Link system. So here I have an untreated control plot, just so you have a feeling on how bad the pressure there was. Here is a treatment on the right top corner here, where we use the post-program only. Okay, and as you can see here, we probably came in a little late with that application, so we missed that ideal window. So you see some of regrowth there of those plants. But the other point there is that a lot of yield potential went away already just because of that early season competition. Okay, this bottom two pictures here is where we have a solid pre-emergent herbicide that was put down at planting, and then you can see the huge difference there in terms of weed control. Okay, a very good level of weed control where a good pre-emergent herbicide was put at planting. Okay, the other thing I want to comment here, as farmers are selecting their pre-emergent herbicides for the 2018 growing season, research has shown that using a pre-emergent herbicide with two effective sites of action tend to provide better level of weed control. Okay, and in this figure here, these two treatments that I'm showing here contain two effective modes of action. For instance, the picture in the left here in the bottom has a group 15 plus a group 14, and in the picture on the bottom right here has got a herbicide that contains actually three active ingredients, two from group 2 or an ALS herbicide plus a group 14. So in terms of recommendation, as we go into the 2018 growing season, we got to start clean. If you are in a system where tillage is part of your operation, a pre-plant tillage will assist eliminating any established weeds. If you're in a no-till system, or if you're not going to be doing any pre-plant tillage and you have established weeds, you want to make sure you use an effective burn down. And there are several effective burn downs out there that can be used at that point. I also encourage, at that planting time, when you go out with a burn down, put a good pre-emergence program. And again, look for herbicides that contain multiple effective modes of action. You can make your own pre-mixes. For instance, you can buy a metribuzin product, you can buy an S-metolachlor product, mix them, spray it, or you can go out there and buy the pre-mixes. Okay, so that's the way to start. That will help you start clean. 3 to 4 weeks into your growing season, start scouting your fields, and as those weeds start breaking through the ground there because the residual is fading away, that's the time you want to be out there with the post-emergence. You don't want to let those weeds grow too much. So when you're selecting your post-emergence herbicide program, you got to understand what type of resistant weeds you're dealing with. Because if you have glyphosate-resistant weeds there, glyphosate won't be a good strategy. So you got to be mixing that glyphosate with something else. Okay, you can use your group 14 herbicides. If you're in a Liberty Link system, you can use glufosinate post-emergence. However, I urge you, if you're going to use glufosinate, you got to spray the weeds when they are small. Glufosinate is a contact product, so you got to be there at the right time when they're 4 inches or smaller. And if you're in a Roundup Ready to Extend soybean system, dicamba become an option. If you're going to be using dicamba post-emergence, I recommend you to use it early in the season and be mindful of sensitive crops around you when going that route. The other thing I want to talk about, when you come with your post program, you have your post-emergence products. If your crop is still long ways from closing the canopy, you may want to consider including a group 15 herbicide, if you would. So your pseudochlors, S-metolachlors, and so on, because what those, adding those at that time will provide an extended residual control until your crop closes that canopy there. If you're not familiar with the modes of action that are within the products you're going to be using, if you have some questions, you can always go and check the NPM Wisconsin herbicide mode of action chart. You can just go to the internet and download the PDF that we have available. In this PDF there we provide information for all the herbicides that are labeled in the state of Wisconsin. So you can check the herbicide product, and then you go to the site of action column there, and you can see how many effective sites of action are within each one of those products. So it's a great resource to have as you're selecting your herbicides for 2018 growing season. So just to wrap things up here, if you're struggling with Waterhemp, 2-pass program, it's probably the way to go. You want to put a good pre-emergent herbicide down there with 2 effective modes of action. You want to continuously scout your field, and when you start seeing the weeds, you want to put your post program, and depending how far you are for your crop to close canopy, you may want to add a residual product or a group 15 herbicide with your post program to obtain a better level of weed control. You want to take advantage of non-chemical strategies as often as possible. Managing herbicide-resistant weeds with herbicides alone will not be a sustainable strategy, especially because the number of effective options in the toolbox are getting very limited. Okay, so take advantage of non-chemical strategy, tillage if that fits your operation, inter-row cultivation. Go narrow on your soybeans there, because that's going to lead to early canopy closure and better weed suppression. Cover crops might be a helpful tool there as well. So think outside the jug a little bit as often as you can, I actually would say. Minimize seed disperse. So if you have a field that has troublesome weeds, make sure you harvest that field last, and when you're moving that equipment around, make sure that equipment gets clean so you are not spreading the problem within your operation. And take advantage of rotational years where more herbicide options are available. So if you have Waterhemp and then you're going into a corn year, there are several herbicides that are very effective for Waterhemp weed control. And make sure that you do a good job controlling the late season escapes there. The escapes will not impact your corn yield. However, if those escapes produce seeds and you're going to soybeans next year, those weeds will be there, and it will become more difficult for you to control them in a soybean year. So, this is what we as a weed science community say to our farmers all the time. If you have no seeds, you're going to have no weeds. So do the best that you can to not let these troublesome weeds produce seeds. So with that, I just want to thank you for your attention. If you have a question, I have my contact information here in the slide. I'll be happy to discuss herbicide programs, or if you have, some specific questions or some things you would like to discuss, just feel free to reach out to me. Thanks again.